Okay, good morning everybody, and we're holding over here in Tehillim. We're starting Tehillim Mizmor Nun number 50, which is really a landmark, I think, for us, because that means that we've been through the first quarter already or the first third of Tehillim. There's 150 altogether, so it only took us, I think, 3 years to get to number 50, so that means 9-10 years down the road, we'll be gray, we'll be wrinkled, all the wonderful things, and Be'ez Hashem, we will keep working our way through Tehillim. So there's quite an introduction over here. There's quite, we don't believe in those. There's quite an introduction today from Rav Foyer in Tehillim, and he says like this. He says that the nature of this particular Tehillim, this psalm, it's describing a very intense desire that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, that he wants to reveal himself to Klal Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like a father who wants to envelop his son in all of his love and all of his warmth and all of his care and concern, in that embrace that is something that is so unique between a father and a son, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is our Avinu Shebashamayim, he is our Father in heaven, he certainly wants to care for us and love us like that as well. But there is a difficulty that Hashem has. When a Jew gets himself sullied up in the dirt and the grime of sin, when a person distances themselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it makes it hard. Not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu there's not anything difficult for him. Not that Hashem is held back from doing anything that he wants. But the symbiotic relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael is such that when we are moving towards Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens his arms and reaches out his hands and he moves close to us. But when we are backtracking, and we are becoming distanced, and we are farther away from where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be, and yes, if we are covered in the grime of sin, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, as much as I want you near me, and I want you to be close to me, it's only going to work if you begin taking the steps and moving in the direction that you're supposed to. Our sages teach us, we've spoken about it probably maybe hundreds of times over the years, and that is that the way in which a person wants to go, they will be drawn in that direction. Somebody who comes to purify themselves, so Messiah HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps them along. Which means that if you are Shuvu Elai, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you return to me, V'ashuv Aleichem, and I will return to you. Which means that if we take that first step towards Hashem, and we show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we'd like to cleanse ourselves and wipe away the dust and the dirt that is piled up on top of ourselves from all of the sin and all the different things that we've been involved with, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm right there. I never left. I didn't distance myself. You went away from me. I have no problem reaching out my hands. There's nothing that's not within my grasp. However, the way that our relation works is when you are coming closer to me, you draw near towards me, so then I will smother you, I will hug you, I will embrace you, I will kiss you, I will love you, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like this father who wants for his son. There is the famous story. It's from one of the earliest stories that I told ever, I think, in Makor Chaim. And perhaps it's been many years since I told it, but there is the story of a young man. He was a bit of a quirky kid in high school. He was socially off. He didn't have many friends at all. And he was one of these, I guess in the language of our generation, they would call him a tech geek. I think that's what they're called. And he used to sit in his house all day long and play around with different gadgets and things, all gizmos. And one day he was playing with his things and he came up with this idea and he put together a whole gadget that he thought was something that would be beneficial to the world. And he went and he got it copyrighted, or not copyrighted, it's patented. And he went and he ended up selling it, and this kid in high school became a multi-millionaire basically overnight. And suddenly he's got tons of friends. Everybody wants to be close to him. Everybody wants to be his friend. And he's got friends and this, and he's social and he's popular. And his parents kept warning him, Johnny, don't forget, you were a geek before all of this. Nobody talked to you. Nobody was your friend. Nobody cared about you. It's nice that you became so social and popular, but people are becoming your friend for all the wrong reasons. Please be careful. There's people that are out there that are going to take advantage of you. And he's like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm doing. Sure enough, one day he meets up with a fellow, not from school, somebody else from outside who heard about him, heard about his invention, heard about all of his money. And he offered him an offer that you cannot refuse. He said, listen, if you invest X amount of millions of dollars into this product over here or into this investment, it's going to double, triple, quadruple. You're going to become a multi-millionaire. All you have to do is just give me the money. I'm experienced in investments. I'm going to go and invest it for you. You'll become a rich man, my son. And Johnny the geek, who didn't have much savvy in his mind, he took basically all of his money, gave it to this person he didn't really know, and was waiting for the investment to come back. A week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks, he doesn't hear from this person. Tries calling him. Number is disconnected. And suddenly he goes from being on top of the world to having nothing at all. And just to make matters worse, which now I'm remembering the details of this story, by the time that he met this particular person was quite some time after he became a rich man. There was a young lady from high school that suddenly says she's madly in love with him, and they go and they get married, and they live in some penthouse apartment in Manhattan, and they have a child, and he's on top of the world. And when he was on top of the world, that's when he met this person over here who took advantage of him. He loses all of his money. He comes home one day and he tells his wife, who has his child, I have bad news for you. I was taken advantage of. And she says, are you a fool? And within days, his wife packs her bags and she leaves with the child, and she never comes back again. The guy's evicted from his penthouse. He's down and out. He's going to restaurants, knocking on the back of the door of the kitchen, begging for food. He has nothing left. He has no place to sleep. He has no place to eat. He doesn't have a car. He has nothing. Until one day he gets so down and out, he finds himself sleeping on a park bench, and he's just wishing in his mind that he's going to die on that bench because he has nothing else to live for. And as he's lying on that bench, he looks up and he sees someone is staring at him, looking down at him. And the man says, son, what's the matter? And he begins to say, if you come with me, I'll take care of you. Come to my house. I have an extra bedroom. I'll give you a shower. I'll give you new clothes. I'll give you food. We'll take care of you, son. And so Johnny has nothing to lose, and he goes with this man. He goes to his house. He gives him a hot bath, a hot shower. He gives him a room, clothes to change into. He helps him get a haircut, and he says, come sit down. Tell me what happened. And Johnny goes through the whole story. And he tells the man his whole life. And he tells him how his parents warned him. And he kept telling his parents, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. And he wrote his parents off already a year or two ago. And now he finds himself with nothing to his name. So the man said, but you have parents. And you have a home. Why don't you just go back home? He said, I can't go back home. After I screamed and I yelled and I disgraced my parents like that, and I didn't listen to them, I didn't honor them, and I told them I know and they don't know, how can I go back to my parents? And he said, for sure you can go back to your parents. What parent doesn't take their child back? Why didn't you write a letter to your parents and tell them what happened and tell them how you feel and tell them on this day, at this time, you're taking the train from New York to your town in Pennsylvania where you used to live, and tell them you're coming home. And they'll be there, I'm sure. But why didn't you write on the letter the following? You know that when two countries are at war, What do? When there's a truce, when there's a peace? They hang up a white flag. Tell your parents the following: there's a tree by the train station over there, and tell them that if they take you back, if they accept you, so then they should hang a white flag hanging from that tree, so that you'll know that when the train pulls up into the station, you'll look out the window, you'll see. If the flag is there, you'll get off the train. If it's not, you'll just keep going. Tell your parents, and I'll send a letter for you. So this boy, he writes the letter, and he pours out his heart, and he apologizes, and he says, next week on Tuesday, I'm taking the train from Manhattan to Pennsylvania. It arrives at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You know that tree that right by the train station? If you take me back and you accept me, please hang up the white flag. So now you have Johnny on the train, and he's sitting next to a well-to-do businessman. It's Tuesday, and he's traveling from Manhattan to Pennsylvania. And he's nervous and anxious as could be, and the man says, boy, what's the matter? Why are you so anxious? Why are you so nervous? And he says, no, don't worry. He says, tell me, maybe I can help you. What's the matter? And so Johnny tells him the entire story that happened to him. And he tells him as the train is getting closer and closer and closer to the station, I'm so nervous. What if the white flag is not there? And he tells him, son, don't worry. What parent doesn't want their child back? And as they're driving, getting closer and closer and closer, they're 1,000 yards away, and the boy says, I can't look, just tell me, you tell me, sir. If you see the flag, 1,000 yards, 500 yards, and he's like, is it there? 400 yards, 200, 100 yards, they're there by the station, and he's got his head buried in his lap, he can't look. He says, sir, is it there? And the man says, Johnny, the entire tree is covered in white. And your parents are standing right there waiting for you. And he gets off the train, he sees the tree wrapped in white, and he goes down and he falls into his parents' arm in a loving embrace, and they're all crying. Says Dovid HaMelech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is there any son that he's not going to take back? Is there any child, no matter how far removed they are, that he's not going to accept if we just make the effort to come back to Hashem? And that's what he's saying is the message of this Tehillim, that yes, Klal Yisrael will stumble, and a Jew will become covered in hate and sin, will dirty ourselves up, will be blackened in the eyes of Hashem. And Hashem says, I'm waiting and waiting to embrace you, to love you, but I just need to see that you take a step in the right direction. That's one idea, says our Foyer, that we're going to see in this Tehillim. The other one is that we're going to speak about korbanos, about sacrifices. And he says these are the words of Rav Hirsch. Elsewhere, Rav Hirsch writes that the word korban, kuf reish beis nun, is really from the language of karoiv, which means to be close. A korban, a sacrifice, an animal that one brings to the Beis Hamikdash for the Kohanim to shecht, for the Kohanim to flay, to bring, to burn, and to sprinkle the blood. That's just a physical act. And it's not really what's going on. The real purpose of the korban is that it draws the person closer to Hashem. It is mekariv, it brings us close. It's a new awakening of the heart and the soul that is accompanied over here by the sacrifice, which merely clothes the penitent with humility and makes him worthy of God's presence. As we know, when a person brings the korban, there's a whole declaration that a person has to say. And one of those things is, if it's a korban chatas, if it's a sin offering, he has to say the following: really, that animal should be me. And really, the blood should be my blood. And really, the burning on the altar should be me. And the dismemberment of all the limbs should be me. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're so kind and you're so loving and benevolent. You don't want that to happen to me. You want me to do tshuva. And therefore, I bring this as a symbol in my own eyes, that you allow your wrath to go out on the animal and not onto me, so I can return to you, and I can do tshuva, and I can rectify my ways and come back. And he writes over here that in this Tehillim, it also says the following: what is the way in which a person will bring themselves closest to Hashem? Person is far away. They went into the distance. They're almost out of sight, out of mind. They want to come close to Hashem. Which mitzvah should it be that a person is going to engage themselves in that's going to bring them the closest? So we'll see here that the one that will bring us closest to Hashem is when a person immerses themselves in the learning of Torah, which is what we are doing here today. We're learning Torah. And he brings down a beautiful statement of Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Rav Chaim Volozhiner was the main disciple of the Vilna Gaon. So he certainly knew, if you're the main disciple of Vilna Gaon, you know the power of Torah study. He said the following: someone who just observes the mitzvahs, the commandments, he establishes a relationship with Hashem which is just Eved and Adain, servant and master. Hashem is the master, I am the servant, I am here to do his bidding, I do whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. However, somebody who studies Torah, somebody whose main occupation is the learning itself, he makes himself worthy of being the son of Hashem. Either we remain in the Eved Oda, in the servant-master relationship, which is fantastic. So when we see the whole story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is, we were Avdei Paro, we were the slaves of Paro, and we become Avdei Hashem, we become the servants of Hashem. So that is the natural state of what our relationship is. But there's a closer relationship that a person can have. And that is, we should be Banim La Hashem Elokeichem, we should be children of Hashem. What allows us to reach the level of a son, of a daughter, of a child of Hashem? The more that we learn HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, which is the mind, it's the Seichel Elokis, it's the mind piece of Hashem, it's His real, true will. It's like the famous mashal that is told that if I ask the servant in my house to bring me a cup of water, it's a hot day, I'm sitting outside on the porch, it's sweltering outside, and I ask the servant, do me a favor, can you bring me a cup of water? So that servant, who's trained to do my bidding, they will go to the kitchen, they'll get the glass, maybe they'll put a couple of ice cubes in, fill it up with water, and they'll bring it to me. And I say, thank you very much, you did what I asked you to do. If I ask my son, sonny boy, Tati, it's very hot out here, can you please do me a favor, bring me a cup of water? My son goes into the kitchen, and he thinks to himself, what would my father really want right now? He opens the fridge and he sees fresh lemonade. And he pulls out a glass and he fills it with ice and he pours the lemonade over the ice, and then he walks outside and he presents me with the glass of lemonade. The way that a son treats the father, the closeness that a child has to his father, is different than that which the Eved, which the servant has with his master. And therefore, what we are aiming for in our relationship is not just that we should be his indentured servant and submissive to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and trying our best to do what the Adon, what the master is asking us, but rather we should be so close, the relationship should be so real and so loving that we become his child. And therefore the way in which we become the child of Hashem is, you got to know what your father wants. The way that you really know what the Father wants is when you understand what is the real roots and the true will of the parent. How does a person do that? You have to learn. Because the learning is the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the details. It's the mind piece of Hashem. And that's what we say in our davening every day in Shmoneh Esrei, Hashivenu avinu l'sarasecha. We say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu return us to your Torah. And so the Mefarshim point out over here, why in the blessing of tshuva, of repentance, are we talking about Torah? Return me to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it should say. But yet the preface to tshuva is Hashivenu avinu l'sarasecha. Return us, our Father, to your Torah. Because when a person connects with the Torah, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes our Father, not just a master. And once that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our Father, then we can do tshuva and we can really return to Hashem. And that's the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. However, of course, he points out, it's very important that the student over here who is learning, the one that is trying to bring himself closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is that the motives are sincere and that they are pure. However, if the inner soul of the person is decayed, if the lips themselves are polluted with lashon hara, with slander and saying things that they shouldn't say, if the eyes are all over the place looking at this wild world that we live in with all the impurities that are there, and while he's doing all of that, he's still trying to learn Torah, so then what is the true value of the Torah over there? Like the famous story that there was once a boy in yeshiva who was struggling very hard. He wasn't enjoying his learning, he wasn't getting in and out of the yeshiva, and he came to his Rosh Yeshiva and he said, I want you to take me to have Aaron Leib Steinman. Take me to the Gadol Hador, the leader of the generation. I need to speak to him. But Rebbe, there's one thing. When we go into his private chambers, I'll do the talking. You can't stop me, you can't say a word. The Rebbe saw that this boy was down and out. He wasn't doing well, so he said, okay. They get into the private chambers of the Gadol Hador, one of the Gadol Hador of Aaron Leib Steinman, the tzaddikim, the righteous men of the generation. And the Rosh Yeshiva introduces this boy and he says he's having a very hard time in yeshiva. He's not enjoying his learning, he doesn't enjoy the davening, he doesn't have an easy time. So Steinman looks at the boy, what can I do for you? His Rebbe, he said, do you enjoy ice cream? Rabbi Leib Steinman ate every day. He had a little cube of food, and a little glass of water, maybe a little tea, something like that. When he came, I remember when he came to Baltimore years ago, we're talking probably 20 years ago, so the Rosh Yeshiva got up after he left, and he said he never saw such a human being like this before. This was a man that was traveling from Eretz Yisrael to America. He was on the run, going and speaking in all different places. He was barely sleeping, barely eating. So he asked for a little morsel of food. What did he want to eat that night after a whole long day? He took some breadcrumbs and a little glass of milk. That's what he ate that night. He said, I never, the Rosh Yeshiva, I didn't know human beings like this were possible in our generation. He's completely cut off from the physical world. So here's the boy, says, Rebbe, do you like ice cream? So I was looking like, what are you talking about? I don't eat ice cream. He said, I'll ask you, Rebbe, steak. Can I bring the Rosh Yeshiva a good steak? So Aaron said, what is steak? I know what steak is. So he begins explaining, it's a piece of meat at this, cooked, barbecued, roasted, all different things. Can I bring you a piece of steak? So Rav Steinman looks at the Rosh Yeshiva, what does this kid want from me? What is he asking me questions for? What? Can I bring you a piece of steak? Would you like a piece of steak? Rav Steinman says, I don't know what steak is. I never had steak in my life. And no, you can't bring me steak. What are you asking? He says, Rebbe, you see, you don't know what ice cream is, so you don't want it. You don't know what steak is, so you don't want it. I know what steak is. It's geschmack. I'll take a steak. I know what ice cream is. It's so sweet, it's so good. I'll take ice cream. He says, but for me, the Torah is like your steak, like your ice cream. I don't have any flavor, any taste for Torah. I don't know what it is all about. So you want me to sit and learn in yeshiva 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day? It means nothing to me. I have no taste from it. So Aaron Leib Steinman looked at this young man and he said to him the following. He said, if you would give me ice cream and I would eat the ice cream, I would know how sweet the ice cream is. If you would give me steak and you tell me it's so tasty, so if you'd put the steak in my mouth, I would know how tasty the steak is. But if my mouth would be filled with sores, canker sores, who knows, lesions, all different things, if you'd put the ice cream, which is so sweet, into my mouth, it would probably be bitter. If you take the steak that was cooked so perfectly and tastes so good, you put it into my mouth, it wouldn't taste very good. He said, if your mouth is being used for other things that are counterintuitive to the Torah, for example, if you are busy speaking words of Lashon Hara, if you have nivel peh, which means you have words coming out of your mouth that are inappropriate words, guess what, my dear child? You are creating sores and lesions in your mouth. And it doesn't matter how sweet and how geschmack the Torah is, when it goes into your lips, it tastes bitter to you. So I recommend the following. Take a spiritual accounting of your life and see what you're using your mouth for. And if in fact you are careless in the laws of Lashon Hara and careless in the words, the inappropriate words that escape your lips, then rest assured, when you begin to fix that, your mouth will come back to be able to appreciate the sweetness of the Torah once again. Says Rav, as we'll see in the Mefarshim, you want Torah to work? You want Torah to be the vehicle, the vessel that's going to bring you closer to the Ribbono Shel Olam? It's got to be done with sincerity. It has to be done with purity. And it must mean then that the mouths that we have that learn the Torah, the minds that we have, the eyes that we use to see the words of Torah, must be in a way that is pure and sincere as well. And finally, he writes over here that as we're going to see in the Tehillim, is going to go along till the end, which is going to be about redemption and the ultimate world of Mashiach coming. At that time in history, every person is going to receive a reward which is congruent with the effort in which they put into this world. So you might not be a tzaddikus on par with Rebbe and Kanievsky. Art Scroll is not going to write a book about you after 120 years. I'm sorry to break the news to you. Most likely. Nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's writing his own biography of you in Shemayim. And it goes according to the efforts that you expend in your life of Avodas Hashem. And he says, a lady in Tarzana, California, who is coming to a shiur on a Sunday morning, pushing herself and making the effort, and she walks in, even though it's hard to find a seat this morning because there's so many people that are here, but yet she pushes her way through the whole crowd and she sits down in front so she can learn Torah. I cannot tell you what the reward is for such a lady. Rebbe Kanievsky, she was learning day and night, she was doing chesed day and night, she was coming from the most illustrious of Torah families in Klal Yisrael at that time. We would expect nothing else of her. Of course she's going to be. Not taking anything away. She went above and beyond and she expanded her life of Torah to be something that was remarkable and noble. But a woman, Bizman Hazeh, in our generation, who's pushing herself and she's growing and she's making changes still, and she's working on becoming a better Ovedes Hashem, a servant of God, in this place over here, when nobody's doing such a thing, or the numbers are small, you can only imagine the reward that you're getting, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is writing in the Art Scroll biography up there in the heavens. And therefore, you should never underestimate what it is that you are receiving as a result of the effort that you make. And it concludes over here in this Tehillim, as we're going to see, that if a person is sincerely yearning for Hashem, then you will pay tribute to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At the end of one's life, you will be zeicha, you will merit to behold the great presence that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be in the presence, NCE at the end, the presence of Hashem. Whoever acknowledges and honors HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should know, says Hashem, as we'll see in the end, I'm preparing the salvation of Hashem. I guess this is story hour over here, because all these old stories keep falling into my head. But the famous story, I'm sure that we also told, the mother of the Vilna Gaon, one of her, besides it being the mother of the Vilna Gaon, which was enough to be proud of, you could probably just sit back and take it easy the rest of your life. If you know that your son is the Vilna Gaon, you'll live off of his reward for eternal bliss. But she was an active woman, and she was one of the Gabbai tzedakah. She was one of the women that collected tzedakah in the town of Vilna. And she had a friend, and they used to go around collecting tzedakah. Every day they would go to the wealthy people, to the non-wealthy people, and they would go and get the tzedakah. So they always wanted to know, how much reward do you think we get for collecting tzedakah every day? Not that you do mitzvahs for reward, but it would be interesting to know what a person is receiving in the world to come. So they made a pact with each other. And the deal was, whoever is nifteris first, whoever dies first, when they get permission, they should come back down in a dream to the other one, and they should let us know what all of the thousands of dollars that we collect for tzedakah, what the reward was that we get for it. So sure enough, I think it was that the mother of the Vilna Gaon passed away first. And she went up to Shemayim, and her friend doesn't hear from her. And one night in a dream, sometime after she died, the mother of the Vilna comes down to her, and she says, "Oh, tell me, what is it? What's it all worth?" "I can't tell you. I'm in the Olam Ha'emes, in the world of truth. Only those that are in this world are privy to be able to see. But I can tell you, they gave me permission to tell you one thing. Do you remember several months ago, we were going collecting one day, and there was a gavir, there was a wealthy fellow, we were trying to get a donation from him. And he lived in a place where you had to walk up a certain flight of stairs to get to his apartment. We walked up the flight of stairs, we knocked on the door, no answer. Okay, we went about our duties, we were collecting more. And halfway through the day, we said, "Look, let's go back to the gvir, let's go back to the wealthy man." We walk up the stairs again, knock on the door, no answer. Now, do you remember that as we were walking down the street, suddenly I saw, this is the mother of the village, I saw the wealthy man, and I pointed and said, "There he is!" And we went running over to him, we asked him for a donation, and he gave us handsomely. She said, "My dear friend, I want you to know that for pointing my finger in the direction of where he was, I cannot even begin to describe to you the enormous amounts of reward that I got for that action." Every little effort that a person makes in this world is gigantic and enormous in the eyes of Hashem, and the reward that you're receiving, you can't even imagine. So she told her, just keep doing what you're doing, push yourself as much as you can, because the reward that is waiting is beyond and above what a person could dream of. And therefore, as we're going to see in the end of this Tehillim, that effort that a person makes here in this world should never ever be underestimated, because it's equal to who knows what in the eyes of Hashem. Let's begin to see this Tehillim. Mizmor la'Assaf, a mizmor, a song to Assaf. I guess in English they call him Assaf, yeah? Assaf, but here you see from the punctuation under his name, there's a kamatz and a kametz, Assaf. Kel Elokim Hashem, God, Elokim, the God of judgment, Hashem, the God of mercy. Diber vayikra aretz memizrach shemesh hamavoyai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. So who is Assaf? Who is this man? We haven't seen him. We're a whole 50 Tehillim in over here. Who is he? So Rabbi explains over here, based on different words of Chazal, that we'll find throughout Tehillim that Dovid HaMelech is not the only composer of the Tehillim. As we saw, just finished learning all the Mizmor, the Bnei Korach, all the sons of Korach, they were also composers. And we saw other ones earlier on, and we'll see later on, Moshe Rabbeinu has some Tehillim over here. There's 10 composers of Tehillim altogether. One of them is this fellow whose name is Assaf. Now, who was he? So it's brought down that in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, we know that the Leviim, they played instruments and they sang in the Beis Hamikdash. The Shir Shel Yom, the song of the day that we say at the end of davening every day, is to remind us of the songs that the Leviim would sing in the Beis Hamikdash. They had heavenly songs, prophetic songs that they sang. When the Karbanos were being brought, they would sing as well. Assaf was a Levi, and he was one of the leading musicians in the band of Leviim that were there. But he was much more than just a composer, says Rav Foyer. He was also endowed with a tremendous spirit of nevuah, of prophecy, so he was a prophet. That's why he made it into Tehillim over here. You don't become a composer of Tehillim if you're Robert Frost. He didn't make it into Tehillim. Dovid HaMelech, who was a man that was imbued with Ruach HaKodesh, divine spirit, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Navi of all, and the Bnei Korach, who had that insight into the reality of Hashem at that time, they made it, and therefore Assaf makes it as well. Now, in the Gemara of Yochanan says that Assaf was actually one of the 3 sons of Korach, who were saved at that time when they said Hashem, when they cried out to Hashem. And he was also responsible for composing the previous ones that we had, but since that he was such a devoted Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, more than the other sons of Korach, so therefore he merits to have his own Tehillim over here that is in his name and in nobody's other name. So whoever exactly Assaf is, we're talking about a lofty person, we're talking about a Levi from the days of the Beis HaMikdash, or not Beis HaMikdash, we're talking about from the days of the Mishkan, from the wilderness over there, because he's the times of Bnei Korach. We're talking about a man that was imbued with nevuah, with prophecy, and on top of all of that, he was a massive Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, and that's why he gets all of this. So what did Assaf tell us? So Rav Hirsch says over here that there's 3 names of Hashem in this pasuk. There, if you look carefully, Kael, Aleph, and Alamid. There is Elokim, and there's Yud Kei Vav Kei, there's Hashem. So what are all these 3 names of Hashem that Assaf is using to describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So he says like this, Kael, the Aleph and the Lamed, is indicative of the strength which is present in every living thing that there is in this world. It's what gives every living creature in the world the ability to breathe and to grow, and that's a strength that everybody's aware of. You're sitting here in the room right now, you're seeing, you're breathing, you're understanding, you're hearing, so you're aware that there is a koyach, there's a strength that is inside of you. What is that? That is a godly strength that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to every living thing in the world. That's something that we're aware of. Elokim, the second name of God that we're describing, of course we know Elokim to be the Midas Hadin, the attribute of judgment, of strict justice in the world. But the way that Rav Hirsch explains it over here is, he's the invisible creator. You can't see Hashem. Now, we try all of our life to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We try to see the product of his actions in the world, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have a shape, he doesn't have a form, he doesn't have eyes, ears, nose, he doesn't have hands, he doesn't have any of that. So therefore there's an invisibility of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. But he's the creator, and he's the Lord and the master of all of the world, and that is the koyach, right? Hashem Elokim means that he is the Baal HaKoyches Kulam, as the Shulchan Aruch says. He is the master of all of the powers of the world. Hashem is in control. He runs the world. And part of running the world is there's got to be judgment. Just like a parent who's trying to keep their house in order, there's got to be rules and regulations in the house to keep a certain order. If you're an employer, you run the business. So you have to have certain rules that are set up in the office space to make sure that things are going along in the right way. So I used to go give a shiur in a certain office, and it was like a tech type of a company, so everybody was always in front of their computers. And almost every single time that I would walk in, I would just want to see, like, they're working, they're not working. Everybody was surfing the web, doing all different things besides really working for what they're supposed to do. So if you're the employer, you make rules. Yeah, maybe he understands that if you're sitting in front of a computer all day long, it's impossible that a person is not going to go and surf the web a little bit. So he has conditions. As long as every 45 minutes and an hour you're really working, I'll let it slide those 15 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. But there's got to be rules. Hashem has rules. He's the Baal HaKoyches Kulam. He sets up a system that we have to live by. And then the name Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, this is the name that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses in order to identify himself as the God of Klal Yisrael. And he says over here that Hashem will champion the cause of Yisrael, the Jewish people, and his employment of Klal Yisrael as the messenger of his will. That's also what Hashem is doing, meaning we are employed by the Rebbeinu. We're working for Hashem as the boss, like the famous book of Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Herman, where he was known to say constantly, it's all for the boss, everything is for Hashem. Hashem is the boss? Yeah, Hashem is the boss. Hashem is the boss of the world. He is our boss, and we are here to serve him and to do his bidding. And that itself is what's going to herald in his sovereignty amongst men. Meaning, when Klal Yisrael acknowledges and recognizes what our task and our mission is here in this world, when we recognize clearly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us, and we see ourselves as the emissaries of Hashem, we represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then, says Rav Hirsch, that will help to bring in Hashem's sovereignty over everyone. If I go into the world and I act in accordance with what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, and I am dedicated, I am consistent, I am fearless in doing the Ratz and the will of Hashem, people will see what it is that I am doing. Whether they agree with me or not agree with me, that's up for discussion. But they could admire the fact that I am a person of principle and I do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do. Such a person, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you bring my sovereignty down to the world. I just saw a story recently, trying to remember all the details, but it was something to the extent of that there is a person who was driving the car on, I think it was an Erev Shabbos, somewhere in New York, and they ended up getting into a fender bender. And they hit a woman, a non-Jewish woman. And they get out of the car, and the guy says, listen, I have no problem, I'll pay you. He said, I'd rather not go to the insurance company, because the insurance company is going to start charging me an arm and a leg on my own policy. He said, it's Friday afternoon, I have to run home right now for Shabbos. I can't go to the bank and get you the money, but I promise you, I'll pay you every penny that you take it to the mechanic, you find out what's going on, I'll pay you in full. I just don't want to go to the insurance company. Will you do such a thing? So the woman looks, this non-Jewish lady, she looks to this man and she says, I will. He says, look, here's my number, here's my picture, my license, whatever. Just, we're not going to go through insurance. No problem, sir. Now, in the interim, she had called her husband, this woman, and the husband drives up, and he's not quite as kind and relaxed as the wife is. And he says to the wife, what's going on over here? And he says, he wants to pay me cash in full. He doesn't want us to go to the insurance. And the husband gets livid. No, you get his insurance information. You can't trust anybody. She tells her husband, I know what I'm doing. No, you got trust me. I know what I'm doing. So the husband and the wife are having it out over there on the side of the road, and the wife refuses to listen to the husband. She will not take the insurance information of this man. She has his number, his driver's license, and he says, Miss, on Monday when the bank's open, I'll go to the bank and I'll bring you the money. No problem. Monday comes, the man waits for her to get the appraisal from the thing, cost X amount of dollars. He says, no problem, I'll bring you the money. He goes to the bank, takes out the cash, and he comes to the lady. And so he goes to the lady's house, And he gives her the money. He says, Miss, I just have to ask you one question. You don't know me. Your husband came, he was very upset with you. And you held your ground that you trust me that I'm going to give you the money. Why did you do that? So she said, I've been a teacher in this particular Beis Yaakov school for the last 25, 30 years. And the principal's name, I don't remember the name right now, the principal's name is something, a woman. He said, this woman is the most honest person I ever met in my entire life. I've never seen her once in the last 25 or 30 years say something that wasn't true. And I see that you're religious. So if you come from the same faith as this woman over here, then I trust you. And I knew that you would give me the money. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when Klal Yisrael follows the directives of Hashem, when Klal Yisrael becomes not just the Eved, not just the servant, but we are the representative, the emissary, we're the child that we represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu wherever we go. So you bring the sovereignty, you bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingdom here into this world. Because even if you get into a fender bender somewhere on the turnpike or on the beltway over there in New York, and the husband's screaming at his wife, get his information. She says, but I know the Jewish people. They're the most honest people I've ever met before in my life. If this man says he's going to pay me, he's going to pay me. That's godliness, and that is Hashem's kingdom here in this world. So Rav Hirsch, and I guess we'll conclude with this because it has to do with this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is Parshas Yisro. It is the Parsha in which Klal Yisrael will stand by Har Sinai and receive the greatest revelation of all time, what we call Maimed Har Sinai, the standing at Mount Sinai, the revelation of the Torah was given over to Klal Yisrael. And he says like this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who spoke. And when he called upon earth to hear his revelation, he said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what was the revelation? The revelation was that he calls upon the Shemayim and the Aretz, the heavens and the earth, to be made, to testify, to be witnesses over here. Klal Yisrael is entering into a covenant called Torah. And the covenant of Torah is binding for all generations. It is a covenant that says, as long as I am alive here in this world, as long as I am a member of Klal Yisrael, that which took place 3,500 years ago when we stood by the mountain and we accepted it upon ourselves, there was a covenant that was being made with us and the Ribbono Shel Olam. And that is, I am a Yid, I am a Jew, I am living my life according to the laws of the Torah. I will keep it to the best of my abilities, and wherever I go, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I will let the world shine with your word, with your mission, with your desire. And therefore, says Rav Hirsch, that when we had the revelation at Har Sinai, and Klal Yisrael accepted it upon ourselves, we became a different nation. We're no longer like the rest of the world. Nobody else entered into the covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, we naseh v'nishma, we are willing and we are able and we are ready to uphold what it says inside the Torah. And that Torah, we're saying, is the union. It's the bond that will exist between our nation, Klal Yisrael, and Kel, Elokim, and Hashem throughout all generations. And the more that a person embraces that, as we saw in the introduction over here, the more that a person will be immersed inside of such a study and a discipline and a lifestyle, the closer they are going to bring themselves to Hashem. We go out of the realm of just the emissary or just the servant. We become Banim La Hashem Elokeichem, we become the children to the Ribbono Shel Olam. And therefore, like it says, Vayikra Aretz Mimizrach Shemesh HaMavoyoi, I call upon the earth from the rising sun to the setting of it. The whole universe testifies to the fact that I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, have given to you the greatest gift of all. and you accepted it upon yourself, not just as a nice thing, not just as side reading when you're bored, but you accepted it upon yourself as the guidebook, as the discipline that a Jew is going to live the life according to from the time that it is given until the end of time and even beyond. And once that Klal Yisrael lives according to the Torah, and those words that are inside of there, that then becomes the greatest Kiddush Hashem, the greatest honor and glory and sanctification of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name here in this world. Okay, we'll pause over here for today. We're holding by 50 Be'ez Hashem. Next week there will be class as well, and we'll continue next week. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
All the best.